All right, I don't know if this has ever happened to you when you were in school. You might have dreaded the release of your report card. If you hadn't prepared your parents for the worst, they were shocked to see just how badly you were doing. We're going to be getting sort of a national education report card on Monday when the National Assessment of Education Progress sort of releases the latest on student math and English scores. That's why they do call it the National Report Card. A fellow will be watching it very closely is Jeb Bush, the former Florida governor. He oversees Excellent right now, which takes a look right now, Excellent in education, and has made a life effort now to help states go ahead and put the focus and the attention on education, quality education at that. He's kind enough to join us now. Governor, good to have you.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks for spotlighting a really important subject that doesn't get much attention. With a month left in the election, education is not one of the top national policy issues, but it's hugely important for our long-term success as a country. And it's likely that the nation's report card will show a horrible situation of decreases in learning, particularly with low-income students. Years of efforts to try to improve rising student achievement actually could be blown up. We'll find that out Monday morning, but I think rather than do the typical thing in politics where people will blame the pandemic or say the dog ate my homework or all the things that go on in politics today, we need to refocus on serious policy making and engagement with parents so that we can deal with these big learning losses.
You know, it's clear that COVID and, you know, obviously people doing classes remotely, if they were so lucky to even do that, did have a factor in this, but you argue it's bigger than that. Explain.
Well, teachers haven't been taught the science of reading, which is now the consensus strategy that applied right will yield rising student achievement. There isn't assessments in many states for kindergarten, first and second graders to be able to deal with the deficiency early on. There aren't the there aren't the mentors for teachers that already exist. Our schools of education aren't really good at teaching reading. Parents aren't aware of the deficiencies that exist. In fact, you know, the report card that they get says that everything is great. The schools are great, everybody's making A's and B's, but in fact, this nation's report card will show that the proficiency levels are, you know, less than half of fourth graders will be reading at grade level, and that's a tragedy. So developing strategies to make sure that, that there's a command focus by parents and by policymakers and teachers on reading and math has to happen. And I would say parental choice, giving parents more customized solutions, including allowing their kids to go to the school of their choice rather than the one that the bureaucracy suggests, has to be part of that as well.
Now, I know when you were governor of Florida, you led this national effort where parents would have the choice and the opportunity not only to explore charter schools, but Catholic schools, other schools with other choices. You might argue that decades later, Governor Youngkin in Virginia has taken that even further to say that parents not only have to have a choice, but to have to fight back at set standards or list or woke education. It's a different sphere, I grant you, but more parental involvement. What do you think of that?
I totally agree. The first thing I think is to not say that parents don't have a say in their child's education. That's the reason why Glenn Youngkin got elected. Right. He forcefully suggested otherwise. And these cultural issues are important, but it's also kind of important that students learn how to read. Because if you're not capable of reading by the end of third grade, it's really hard to imagine how you're going to do science and math and social studies starting in fourth. So there's a new approach. Believe it or not, Mississippi is one of the leaders in the country now for a new strategy that has emerged, taking some of the success of states like Florida and building on it, where cadres of teachers actually understand the science of reading. And there's a new effort by governors across the country to really focus on math as well. And there are tools that parents can use, like Zern and Khan Academy, so that they can play a constructive role. And the final thing I'd say is that when there are assessments of where students stand, parents ought to be given that information, and then they ought to be given the tools necessary to help their child, if there are deficiencies, to rectify those. These learning losses are real, and they're particularly real with low-income families that don't have necessarily the resources that affluent families do. So to me, this is a national calling. It's not going to be a national federal program for sure, but it is a national calling. We should have mentors and tutors in all these schools. We should be dealing with this because these learning losses are going to create economic hardship and pathologies that will develop for the next generation that will be hard to overcome.
We might already be seeing it in college enrollments, to your point, Governor. In the latest period, it looks like they're down about 2%. We're also seeing China occupying more of the top 100 secondary education models across the world, and fewer U.S. schools on that list. What do you think is going on?
Well, Neil, who's marching in the streets for the fact that less than half of our kids are college and/or career ready, even though 85 to 90% graduate from high school? Who's fooling who? You know, we've lowered standards, we've lowered expectations, we blame all sorts of reasons why students aren't learning, rather than redoubling our efforts, as a dynamic nation should, to make sure that they do. And it is a danger. It is harming our competitive posture.
But yet we're spending
the jobs
a lot
that are
of
going
money,
to be created
right,
a
Governor?
decade from now.
I'm sorry, we are
oh my
spending
God,
a lot of money. So is
than,
that the answer, or are we just putting it in the wrong areas?
No. We're putting it in the wrong area. We're not focusing on customizing the learning experience. But we spend more per student than any country in the world other than the Benelux countries. I mean, that is not the problem. And with COVID money still unspent, governors and policymakers, legislatures, and school board members have a real chance now to develop meaningful strategies that will rectify this. But what shouldn't happen, and is likely to happen in some places, is basically to point fingers and say this is someone else's fault, it's not my job. And that would be a tragedy.
Let me ask you, the rap against Republicans is they don't have the concern for teachers that Democrats do. And that's why teachers generally more identify, and the teachers union, very, very powerful in and of its own right, with Democrats more than Republicans. Now, you countered that a lot when you were governor in Florida, and were able to forge partnerships and the rest. But that is a rap that still exists nationally in terms of the impression of Republicans on this issue. Does that worry you?
It is an issue for sure, but I think the opposition to teacher unions is very different than holding up high the profession of teaching and doing things to increase pay, to give better training, to improve the schools of education. There's a lot that conservatives can do to improve the teaching profession, but if the economic interests of teachers is the only thing that matters because unions dictate that, and stop the kind of reforms that would make it possible for rising student achievement to take place, I think it's important to oppose that. And hopefully that's going to happen more, where people aren't fearful of taking on these really powerful entrenched interests all across the country. The states that'll do it, like Arizona just passed the first statewide ESA, Education Savings Account, where the money runs with the student. The parents decide how to customize the learning experience for their kid. That kind of reform is going to improve all schools, and more states are trying to embrace that kind of idea.
Governor, I'd be remiss, and there's other news developing right now. Just last week, Donald Trump had cited your father, your late father, George H.W. Bush, the former president of the United States, as someone who had papers, he said, took millions and millions of documents to a former bowling alley, and they were pieced together with what was old and broken Chinese restaurant. In other words, that they were stored in a place like that. I didn't quite understand the attack line, but I did want to give you the opportunity to respond to that.
Sure. I mean, have you heard the Southern expression, bless his heart?
I have indeed.
You know, it's bless his heart. I mean, this is kind of a weird accusation. The National Archives, when they're building these presidential libraries, have to find a place to store all of the documents that are going to go into the archives at the presidential libraries. And this was an abandoned bowling alley that they fixed up, that they secured, that had all the security necessary to make sure that national security matters were protected, and they used that to build out the presidential library, just as every other president has done as well. And I think the added little feature of the Chinese restaurant, kind of makes it all easier for the conspiratorialists to get all
well,
hot
was
and
it
bothered.
a Chinese restaurant as well? That part lost me. I do remember about a temporary storage facility as the library was being built. In fact, I distinctly remember that. But where did that come from? And was he insinuating that your father had a link to China there? What did you think?
I think that's what he's trying to do. It was a little too subtle for me to completely grab, but the fact is that I think what he wants to say is everybody does it basically. Everybody takes documents and stores them at their at their hotel or in a bowling alley, and that he didn't do anything wrong. Whether he did or didn't, I don't know. But the simple fact is that equating the National Archives employees doing their duty in the proper way is a far cry from keeping national security papers in Mar-a-Lago.
Is that a serious enough offense to you, Governor, that he did have those documents there in Mar-a-Lago, that it warrants following action?
It's really impossible to tell. I have no clue.
But you do seem to be saying there's a big difference between that and what was the storage of your father's documents ahead of that library.
Well, exactly, because my dad didn't go to the bowling alley and didn't go to the Chinese restaurant to look at millions of papers and pick which ones he wanted. That was the process that every president, once they leave office, goes through. It's very different than taking documents that may or may not have been appropriate to take. I don't know. That's the part I don't know. And storing them in an unsecure place in the basement of Mar-a-Lago. Bless his heart,
So, do you have any horse in the race for the next presidential election?
No. I'm focused on rising student achievement and how we can create a better America by solid policy at the state and local level.
So with Ron DeSantis, your successor, Republican governor, popular in his own right, as were you, he is rumored to be in the mix?
He will be a formidable candidate if he runs for lots of reasons, but the reason why I'm a Ron DeSantis fan is he's governed effectively in the state that I love. He's been a really good governor.
Education, you think, should be more of a key issue, bottom line, no matter who gets that nomination?
Yeah, it's not a federal government issue, but it is a national priority to improve where we stand.
Finally, your assessment of where things stand. The British Prime Minister is out after 44 days on the job. We talked about global impatience with leaders right now, regardless of the parties in power, conservative or liberal. Is there a lesson, a reminder here?
Yeah, I think there's a big lesson in that the institutions that we've relied on, the people that preside over those institutions, aren't working the way we want them to work. And so people believe our democracy is imperiled, maybe not for the same reasons that the pundits on some of the television outlets talk about, but because they believe the system's not working for them. They believe the system is broken and that there's too much corruption. So fixing that, I think, will alleviate some of this amazing amount of anxiety that people feel that is eroding the belief that the system's working.
Finally, Florida, of course, has been a beacon for people who want to escape high taxes elsewhere. I'm just wondering now, given this correction and higher rates, whether you think that beacon has lost its sort of allure.
Absolutely not. I think that Florida will continue to grow. The state legislature and Governor DeSantis have focused on the long-term things, protecting the Everglades, building more infrastructure, doing the things necessary to keep our state functioning well. And when you compare Florida's roads, their schools, the systems, the water systems and the like, compared to places where people are migrating out of, it's a pretty easy sell. And so I would expect to see, hopefully, that we won't go into a recession. For a lot of working families, that would be a disaster. But if we do, I think Florida will fare far better than many other states.
As someone who watches the state closely, has a little place there as well, Governor, I do notice that a lot of New Yorkers and New Jerseyans who are coming to your state have done very little to help the driving in your state. Does that worry you on that level alone, that too many Northerners are coming and they don't know how to drive?
You know what? We have enough native-born Floridians that don't drive well for me to be too critical.
All right, I was just thinking, okay, slip that one in there and see who you could alienate. Governor Jeb Bush, a real pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Neil.
All right.